Santa skipped our house this year. Maybe he doesn't like small houses. If stories of healing, second chances, and quiet acts of courage speak to your heart, please subscribe so you can follow every chapter of this journey to its lavender-lit ending. The morning sky over Portland hung the color of tin. A shy winter sun tried to press through low clouds, turning the frost on the schoolyard into a dimmer constellation. Ethan Walker stood beside the flagpole at Grant Park Elementary School, hands buried in the pockets of a charcoal coat that, like most of his suits, had learned to move with his impatience. He waited for the head custodian to return with the receipt acknowledging an anonymous endowment, $1,000 earmarked for students whose households never seemed to catch a break. He had insisted on no plaque, no portrait, no ceremony. In a life where his name grinned from scaffolds across the city, anonymity felt like oxygen. The bell clanged and the building exhaled children into the cold. Hats bobbed, backpacks thumped. Teachers tugged their sleeves down and paraded lines of laughter toward idling buses. Ethan almost turned to go until he saw a small figure in a frayed red coat perched on the stone steps near the side entrance. She sat very still, as if stillness were a way to stay warm. Thin legs, gray tights, sneakers that had once been white. He could not see her face because her chin disappeared behind a pair of mittens patched at the palms. Beside her sat a paper grocery bag, folded neat as a letter. Ethan hesitated, then crossed the plaza, the frost talking back beneath his soles. She looked up when the shadow of him arrived. Brown eyes, bright in the way a window is bright when a house is dark, studied him without alarm. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked, voice careful. "Mom's at the hospital," the girl said. "Night shift. She sleeps during the day. Dad had to go to the job place. He said he'd be quick." She lifted one mitten like a tiny gavel and added with grave ceremony, "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers." "That's a sensible rule." He nodded. "I'm Ethan." "Lila," she said, then, remembering the rule, corrected herself. Never mind." He smiled. "I won't keep you. You look cold." "I'm collecting warm," she said, and tucked her hands back beneath her elbows. A gust came up from NE 33rd Avenue, hauled a leaf along the steps, rattled the metal door behind her. Ethan shifted to block the wind. The school custodian pushed through the main entrance at the far end and waved the envelope. He'd be right there. Ethan returned a small wave and, without looking at the girl, asked, "What's in the bag?" Lila nudged it with her shoe. "Not anything now." She sent the bag a shy look. "It had noodles, buttered noodles. We put them in a thermos for lunch, but I gave mine to Eli because his mom forgot, and his stomach made noises like whales." Ethan followed her glance toward the playground where a boy in a green beanie tried to conquer the monkey bars. The smallness of the world, its economy of hunger and kindness, hit him the way cold air can make the lungs ache. "I'm sure Santa would approve," he said. That is when she delivered it. Softly, "The way you confess a worry to the wind. Santa skipped our house this year. Maybe he doesn't like small houses." The words startled him, not because they were naive, but because they sounded like an echo from another time. In a sudden, bright ache of memory, he was 8 again in a duplex off SC 82nd, watching the silhouette of his mother tape newspaper around a shoebox and paint a crooked holly leaf with the tip of a bobby pin. His mother, a nurse, would smile a tired smile and say, "Real wealth is what you leave in hearts, Ethan, not banks." He had built an empire on the steel of that sentence, and yet here on the steps of his old grade school, the steel felt thin against a child's December. "I don't think Santa dislikes small houses," he said. "I think sometimes he gets diverted. Snowstorms. Reindeer paperwork." The joke tried to land and didn't. He cleared his throat. "Do you like surprises, El?" He stopped himself. No names. "Do you like surprises?" "They're my favorite," she said. except when they're loud. Mine too, he murmured. The custodian's footsteps clanged closer, the envelope already outstretched. Ethan took it with a quiet thank you. Across the yard, a teacher called, "Bus 12, let's roll." Lila watched the line form, but didn't move. No backpack, no rush. He recognized the posture of children who measure their steps by what's at home. "Your father's job place?" he asked. "Is it near?" She nodded toward Powell Boulevard, as if every street in Portland ran eventually to a factory door. He said they closed the big machines, but he will find a small one. Ethan felt the sentence like a screw turning. He knew these closures. He negotiated them. He had reshaped a map of derelict mills and riverfront rust into hotels with glass-like water and retail that gleamed. He had believed, as bankers and glossy renderings assured him, that cities must molt to stay alive. He had not pictured the molt from a child's eye level, a father promising to find a small machine. "Do you have long to wait?" he asked. "Not long," she said, with the certainty of children who know that promises are clocks. "I'm 5.5. I can count to 100 by fives. Want to hear?" "I would," he said, then hurried to add, "but I have to head that way." He nodded toward Any Knott Street, where his car, no driver today, not here, sat unobtrusive under a Douglas fir. "Would you like a hot chocolate before your dad returns? We can ask your teacher to join you." "I can't," she said, with the matter-of-fact dignity of a rule follower. "We're not supposed to leave with people we don't live with, but thank you." She paused. "Could you stand here for 2 minutes? It's warmer when the wind hits you and not me." He laughed softly. "That I can do." So he stood, an expensive windbreak, while a small person recited fives, 5, 10, 15. No hesitation, no bargaining. She reached 100 and clapped mitten to mitten, pleased by a victory the world wouldn't notice. Ethan looked out past the schoolyard to Grant Park, bare trees frisked by the winter air, and wondered how a life gets rearranged. It rarely happens with a crash, he thought. More often, it's a hinge so quiet you don't hear it turn. A sedan pulled up against the curb, cough-bright exhaust, a dented bumper that had survived a more reckless decade. A man in a faded work jacket hurried out, wiping his hands on a shop rag as if the rag itself contained better news. His eyes found the girl and softened. Then, noticing Ethan's height and coat and aura of executive, they tightened. "Pumpkin," he called. "Sorry, traffic was a bear." He scooped Lila up, and she put her head on his shoulder with the practiced relief of a child well-loved. He glanced at Ethan. "Everything okay here?" "Yes," Ethan said, stepping back to remove any suggestion of claim. "We were just counting. She's very good at reaching 100. The man's mouth tugged into a smile despite whatever else crowded his day. "She gets that from her mom. I'm Jacob." Ethan almost offered his last name, a habit as reflexive as reaching for a card, but something in him recognized that names could tilt a moment off balance. "Ethan," he said simply. "Thanks for keeping an eye," Jacob added. He shifted the paper bag to his other hand. It was lighter than it should have been. "We're headed home. It's noodle night." "Again," Lila whispered, as if repetition were both comfort and confession. Ethan nodded. "Noodle night is undefeated." They started down the steps. Lila turned and, with sudden urgency, called back, "Do you think Santa only brings presents to houses with real chimneys?" The question struck like a bell inside him. The custodian had long since disappeared. The playground was emptying, a bus door folded shut with a sigh. Ethan chose his words as if they were fragile glass. "I think," he said, "Santa brings them to houses with open hearts, and some presents don't need wrapping." Lila considered this, then said, "Maybe he could bring a surprise you can't see." "Maybe," Ethan said, and felt under his ribs a truth he had avoided, that he had been delivering the wrong kind of gifts for a very long time. "Say thank you, Pumpkin," Jacob said, and Lila waved her mittens with such solemn grace that it felt like being knighted. They turned toward the curb. The sedan coughed again and welcomed them like an old dog. Ethan stood on the steps for a moment after they had gone, letting the cold climb the inside of his sleeves, letting the city he loved come alive in its ordinary noises. Bus brakes, bird gossip, a distant siren that was probably not an emergency. He looked down at the envelope in his pocket. $1 million for scholarships would change a ledger and a handful of lives. Good work by any measure. But Lila's question had opened a door that the donation had not even knocked on. He began to walk, not toward the car, but toward N.E. Broadway, where a toy workshop in Hawthorne he remembered from years ago might, if it still existed, know how to stitch surprise into cloth. But he stopped himself. Not yet. No appearances on school grounds with packages and smiles. The world after 2010 carried its own protocols and alarms. If he wished to deliver a gift that could not be mistaken, by cameras, by policies, by public hunger for spectacle, he would have to learn the discipline of quiet. On Knee 28th, a bicyclist sailed past, scarf trailing, and the city's breath fogged the windshield of his car when he finally reached it. He sat for a moment with the engine off, fingers on the steering wheel, and watched two crows argue over a crust in the parking lane. "Open hearts," he said aloud to no one. He pictured a small cafe with round windows and a lavender planter. He pictured buttered noodles handed without price tags. He pictured a workshop where machines were small enough for big, careful hands. At a red light on Weidler, he took out his phone and typed a note in the app he used for budgets, promises, and midnight ideas. Grant Park scholarship complete. Next, find a way to bring a surprise you can't see. Rule, no cameras. Rule, ask before giving. Rule, fix what I helped break. The light turned green. He slipped the phone away. As he turned south toward the Pearl District, a hush he recognized, rare as snow in March, gentle as a hand on a fevered brow, settled in the car. It was not the silence of loneliness he had worn like a suit for years, but the pause of a promise beginning to assemble itself. Behind him the school bell rang again. Children poured inside. On the steps, frost brightened and then, under the timid pressure of noon, began to soften. Houses with real chimneys, and houses with none breathed the same pale winter air. Somewhere a nurse drank the first coffee of her morning. Somewhere a laid-off mechanic rehearsed a new version of courage. And in the middle of the city, he had spent a lifetime remaking out of glass and renderings. Ethan Walker understood that some projects do not require demolition. They require an open door and a steady hand. He put the car in drive and, for the first time in years, let the destination remain unnamed. The city wore rain like a thin veil that evening. From the penthouse balcony in Pearl District, Portland spread beneath Ethan Walker in bands of gold and gray, the bridges over the Willamette River blinking awake, the tram cables humming in the wind, and the faint sound of street jazz from a bar below. But Ethan didn't hear the music. He stood at the window, his reflection a half-ghost in the glass, a man surrounded by everything and touched by nothing. The apartment was immaculate. Concrete floors, a wall of glass, leather, oak, silence. Yet somewhere between the rain tapping on the railing and the dim light from his desk lamp, something felt unfinished. He poured himself coffee that had long gone cold and sat before the walnut desk that was both battlefield and shrine. He slid open the second drawer on the right. Inside, perfectly aligned folders, each labeled in serif font: projects, holdings, reforms, legacy. Beneath them lay a smaller, unmarked envelope. He opened it and took out a faded photograph. A young woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling under fluorescent hospital light, holding a boy in a paper crown. His mother, Margaret Walker, Providence Medical Center, 1988. The corners of the photograph had curled like petals. Ethan smoothed them flat with his thumb. In the picture, he was 7, missing a front tooth, clutching a shoebox wrapped in newspaper, his mother's invention for Christmas that year. He remembered how she had whispered, "We couldn't afford shiny paper, but the news keeps the stories warm." Now, decades later, his office was full of shine but starved of warmth. He had spent years building Walker Urban Group on a promise to rebuild cities, to revive forgotten spaces. But the longer he stared at the skyline, the more the word revive twisted into something hollow. Each luxury tower stood where a story used to live: a bakery, a mechanic's shop, a home. He set the photograph upright on the desk and leaned back. The heating system clicked on, but the room stayed cold in ways machines couldn't fix. His computer pinged. An email from Portland School Board blinked at the corner of the screen. "Mr. Walker, we would be honored to feature your name on the new Hall of Honor at Grant Park Elementary, recognizing alumni who have contributed significantly to the community. The dedication ceremony will be televised. Please confirm attendance so we may prepare the plaque." He read it twice. Recognition. Another invitation to have his name gilded where a child's name once was chalk. Years ago, he would have accepted instantly, understanding that visibility sold credibility. But tonight, the idea of applause felt cheap. His mind drifted to the little girl in the red coat asking if Santa avoided small houses. He clicked reply and typed slowly, "Thank you for the offer. Please direct all recognition to the students and staff. No plaque, no publicity. Keep the focus on them." He hesitated, then added one more line. "True wealth leaves no label." He hit send before he could second-guess it. Outside, a delivery drone buzzed across the skyline, blinking red like an artificial star. He followed it until it disappeared into the low mist. Then the phone rang. Lydia Tran, his head of PR. "Ethan, are you serious about this anonymous donation?" she began, her tone brisk, metallic. "The press could turn this into a major brand moment. Imagine the headline, 'Local CEO gives back to his roots.' It's clean, powerful, human, and performative," he cut in. "Not if it inspires others." "Lydia," he said gently, "I'm not doing this for others to see me. I'm doing it so a child doesn't have to wait on frozen steps again." A pause. "Ethan, with respect, the board expects visibility. Shareholders love philanthropy when there's a camera." "That's the problem," he said. "They love the camera, not the cause." She sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from someone calculating lost marketing value. "I'll market confidential, but the press will find out eventually." "Then let them find out too late to spin it," Ethan said, ending the call. He leaned back, eyes still on the photograph. His mother's words drifted through memory like threads through fabric. "Real wealth is what you leave in hearts, not banks." For years, he'd quoted it in interviews, printed it on company brochures, turned her humility into a tagline. But he realized now that he had been selling her truth instead of living it. He rose and crossed to the shelf above the fireplace. Among architectural awards and framed covers of Forbes and Architectural Digest sat a single, dusty box labeled Personal. Inside, a cheap glass snow globe from a thrift shop, its base cracked but its glitter intact. When he shook it, a miniature Portland shimmered under falling silver flakes. He had bought it as a boy with pocket change, telling his mother that one day he'd own the skyline. He smiled, but the smile didn't hold. He set the globe next to her photo and whispered, "Well, Mom, I own it now. But I think I built the wrong city." The rain thickened outside, clinging to the glass like tears on a curtain. A soft chime echoed from the smart intercom. Andre, his driver, confirming tomorrow's 7 a.m. pickup for a board review at Walker Urban Group headquarters. Ethan stared at the blinking light, debating whether to cancel. The thought of returning to that marble boardroom full of men who measured morality in quarterly returns made his stomach tighten. Instead, he sat back down and opened the folder titled Powell Industrial Redevelopment. Inside, the blueprints for the Riverlight Hotel, the very project that had forced the shutdown of an old manufacturing plant months earlier. The plant's workforce had been relocated, as the report said. But he knew what relocated meant. Lives scattered, paychecks erased. He scanned the margins, where his own signature gleamed like gilt in ink. Powell Street, he whispered. The same area Lila's father had mentioned. A heaviness settled in his chest. Every redevelopment victory, every champagne toast, suddenly looked like a domino that had fallen the wrong way. He closed the folder, but the numbers glowed behind his eyelids like neon. Square footage, net gain, projected ROI. None of them measured what he had just seen on that school step, a child making warmth out of cold. He opened his laptop again, pulled up the Riverlight proposal and began scrolling through pages of cost analysis until he reached the Community Impact Assessment. It was 2 paragraphs long. 2 paragraphs to justify uprooting 30 families. He rubbed his temple and whispered, "Not good enough." The cursor blinked. He clicked Add Comment and typed, "Initiate review of displaced worker outreach plan. Include retraining partnerships, childcare stipends, and community benefit credits. Deadline, immediate." He saved the note and sat back. It was a small gesture, a single pebble dropped into a wide river, but rivers begin somewhere. His phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "This is Megan Bennett. I just wanted to thank you for being kind to my daughter today. She told me about the noodles and the counting. I don't know what you said to her, but she fell asleep smiling for the first time in weeks." Ethan stared at the message until the letters blurred. He typed and deleted 3 times before settling on, "She reminded me of something I'd forgotten." He didn't hit send. Instead, he saved her contact as Megan B., nurse, Providence, and closed the phone. Some gratitude deserved silence rather than reply. Outside, lightning flashed once over Mount Tabor, washing the room in white. For a moment, the reflection of his mother's photograph and the skyline overlapped in the glass, one woman, one city, both asking him the same question. Now that you have built everything, what will you rebuild inside yourself? He poured out the cold coffee, replaced it with water, and stood by the window again. Far below, a food truck parked near the corner, its neon sign flickering "Open Late." A couple huddled beneath an umbrella, laughing, sharing fries. The ordinary beauty of it pierced him deeper than the city's grandeur. In that quiet, he made a decision without writing it down. Tomorrow, before the board meeting, he would visit the site on Powell Street. Not as CEO, not as a developer, but as a man who had once believed every building could be rebuilt except himself. He turned off the lights, leaving only the desk lamp on the photograph. His mother's smile glowed softly, patient as always. "Real wealth," he murmured again, and this time it didn't sound like a slogan. Then he closed the drawer. The photograph stayed on the desk. The night stayed awake with him. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving Portland rinsed and trembling in light. Fog slid off the rooftops like breath, and the smell of wet cedar hung in the streets. Ethan Walker parked his car on Hawthorne Boulevard, just across from a narrow storefront with a hand-painted sign, "Miss Hazel's Toy Workshop, since 1954. The shop looked like it had refused to join the century. Faded blue trim, window full of wooden trains, rag dolls, and tin spinning tops, all arranged with the tender disorder of memory. Ethan stood outside for a long moment, watching an old woman wind a music box inside. Then he pushed open the door. A tiny bell rang, bright and old-fashioned. Inside, the air smelled of pine dust, fabric glue, and cinnamon. Rows of hand-stitched animals sat shoulder to shoulder on the shelves. A small heater hummed near the counter, its warmth fragile but determined. Behind it, Miss Hazel, white hair braided and pinned with a red pencil, looked up from her workbench. "Morning, sir. Looking for a birthday gift or something the doctors can't prescribe?" she asked with a wink. Ethan smiled. Maybe a bit of both. He hesitated, feeling oddly out of place among the stuffed bears and whirring wooden birds. The last toy he'd bought had been for a client's charity auction, a collector's piece, never meant for play. Miss Hazel studied him over her bifocals. "You don't look like a man who collects toys." "I'm not," he admitted. "I'm looking for a gift for a little girl. She's 5, brave, honest, too honest maybe." The woman chuckled. "A dangerous age for truth. What's she like?" "She's small, but mighty," Ethan said slowly, searching for the right words. "She believes Santa skipped her house because it's too small." Miss Hazel stopped stitching. "Well, that's just heartbreak in a sentence." She nodded toward a shelf near the back. "Hand-stitched dolls. Pick one that feels like her." Ethan walked along the shelf. Each doll had its own face, crooked smiles, curious eyes, imperfect perfection. One wore a red coat with mismatched buttons. He reached for it instinctively. "This one," he said. "Good eye. She's the last of last year's batch. Folks call her Hope." Miss Hazel wrapped the doll in tissue paper. "You want to add a name?" "Yes," he said. "Lila." The old woman embroidered it with silver thread while Ethan watched the careful dance of her hands. It took nearly an hour, and during that time, the shop filled with the sound of her humming, an old lullaby that made the room feel like childhood's attic. When she finished, she handed him the doll. Across the chest, neat letters shimmered, "Lila." "Perfect," Ethan murmured. "How much do I owe you?" Miss Hazel looked him up and down, expensive shoes, wristwatch worth a semester of tuition, and said gently, "It's already been paid for. Someone else left a gift card here for the next person who needed it. Pay it forward when you can." He hesitated. "At least let me—" She shook her head. "Paying it forward means keeping the chain alive, not returning the same link." Ethan tucked the doll carefully into a paper bag. "Then I'll make sure it reaches the right hands." "Be kind, not clever," she said as he left. "The world's full of clever men." The bell chimed again behind him as he stepped into the daylight. That afternoon, Ethan drove toward Grant Park Elementary. School had just let out. Children swarmed the sidewalks, their backpacks bouncing, laughter sharp and clean in the cold air. He parked discreetly and waited near the edge of the playground. When he spotted Lila, she was kneeling to tie another child's shoe, her tiny fingers working with practiced care. He smiled. Small but mighty, indeed. He waited until the crowd thinned, then approached the school gate. Lila's teacher, Mrs. Connors, stood nearby talking to a parent. Ethan raised a hand politely. "Excuse me," he said. "I have a small gift for one of your students. A thank you, really." Mrs. Connors turned, assessing him in one brisk glance. "And you are?" "Ethan Walker. I met Lila Bennett yesterday." The teacher's posture stiffened. "I see. And you'd like to give her a present?" "Yes. Just something handmade." He held up the paper bag, trying to look harmless. Mrs. Connors's smile froze. Mr. Walker, I'm sure your intentions are good, but school policy requires that all gifts to students go through administration. We've had incidents. I understand, he said quickly. Could you deliver it for me? Before she could answer, a uniformed school safety officer appeared from behind the doorway, his radio crackling. Everything all right here, ma'am? Ethan froze. The doll, the bag, the schoolyard, all suddenly wrong in combination. Mrs. Connors raised her hands slightly. It's fine, officer. Mr. Walker was just— Sir, can I see some ID? The officer interrupted, polite but firm. Ethan handed over his wallet, heart knocking. Around them, parents began to glance over. Cameras lifted, a habit of modern life. The officer studied the license. CEO of Walker Urban Group? Yes, Ethan said. I grew up here. I was donating to the scholarship fund yesterday, that's all. Mrs. Connors frowned, processing. Oh, you're that Mr. Walker. Yes, he said quietly. That one. The officer's tone softened. We just have to be cautious. You'd be surprised what happens around kids these days. No apology needed, Ethan replied. Caution is good. Lila appeared then, tugging her pink backpack, eyes wide. Mr. Ethan? Mrs. Connors knelt. Sweetheart, this gentleman brought something for you. I'll check it first, all right? The officer peeked into the bag, revealing the small cloth doll. No hidden compartments, no tech gadgets, just thread and kindness. Safe as oatmeal, he said, handing it back. Mrs. Connors smiled now, a little embarrassed. Thank you, Mr. Walker. I'll make sure she gets it. Ethan nodded. Tell her it's from Santa's friend, the one who runs late. Lila giggled. You know Santa? I know a few reindeer, he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. That made her laugh, a bright, hiccuping sound that thawed the air around them. Ethan turned to leave, but as he reached the gate, he heard her small voice again. Mr. Ethan, did you bring a surprise you can't see? He looked back. Mrs. Connors held the doll. Lila's eyes shone. Not yet, he said, but I'm learning how. He waved, then disappeared into the afternoon crowd. At his office the next morning, Lydia Tran stood at his doorway, tablet in hand. We've got a problem, she said. Someone posted a video from the school. It's already getting traction. Billionaire hands gift to little girl, that kind of thing. Ethan rubbed his temple. Of course they did. Want me to pull it down? No, he said after a moment. Let it stay. But issue a statement. No interviews, no photos, no comment. The story doesn't belong to me. Lydia frowned. That's unconventional. So was kindness once, Ethan replied, eyes drifting to the doll now sitting on his desk. He'd made sure a second one was crafted overnight to remind him of the first. That evening, as the city lights flickered alive across the Willamette, he stood by the window again, turning the small handmade doll over in his hands. He thought of the officer's suspicion, the teacher's wariness, the cameras, all signs of a world that had forgotten how to trust simple gestures. He whispered to the quiet room, "Be kind, not clever." Outside, a siren wailed and faded into the distance. Inside, the doll's stitched smile seemed to echo Miss Hazel's wisdom, that real gifts don't sparkle, they stay. He said it beside his mother's photograph, a bridge between two generations of givers, one who wrapped gifts in newspaper, the other who was finally learning how to unwrap himself. Tomorrow, he would see what waited on Powell Street. The next evening, Portland was breathing steam again, soft mist curling above the river, street lamps dripping amber light into puddles. Ethan parked outside Mother's Bistro and Bar, a cozy place on S.W. Stark Street where his mother had once taken him after her night shifts. The window still glowed the same warm honey color, and the smell of cinnamon rolls and roasted garlic drifted onto the sidewalk. He hesitated at the door, wondering if he was intruding on a world that had outgrown him. Then he saw them through the glass, Megan Bennett and her daughter Lila, sitting at a corner table under the hanging lights. Lila's red coat was draped over the chair, her brown hair tied back with a piece of yarn, legs swinging in rhythm with the hum of conversation. Megan's face carried the fatigue of double shifts, but her eyes were gentle, lit with the quiet alertness of a mother who measures every hour by her child's safety. Ethan stepped inside. The hostess looked up. "Good evening. Table for one?" He nodded toward the corner. "Actually, I'm meeting someone." When Megan looked up and saw him, surprise flickered into caution. Lila's expression, however, bloomed like sunrise. "Mr. Ethan, we're eating noodles," she announced, waving a fork triumphantly. He smiled. The best kind. Megan rose halfway from her chair, unsure whether to stand or hide. "Mr. Walker, I didn't expect—" "I hope it's all right," he said softly. "I wanted to make sure I didn't cause you trouble at school." Her shoulders eased slightly. "It was a misunderstanding. The principal called. They know who you are." "That's not always a comfort," he replied with a faint smile. "May I?" Megan gestured to the empty chair. "Of course." When he sat down, the waitress appeared, a cheerful woman with a pen behind her ear. "Evening, folks. What can I get for you?" "Just coffee for me," Ethan said. "Make it decaf," Megan added gently. "He looks like he hasn't slept." The waitress chuckled and walked off. Ethan glanced at her, amused. "You can tell?" Megan shrugged. "Night shifts train you to read tired faces. Comes with the job." "What's your specialty?" he asked. "Pediatric recovery. Providence Medical Center." His smile softened. "My mother used to work there." Something passed between them. A flicker of shared ground, like two strangers realizing they'd both walked the same hallway once, years apart. Meanwhile, Lila had been shaping her buttered noodles into tiny mountains. She looked up suddenly. "Mom says when we can afford it, we'll open our own cafe, with windows shaped like circles and lavender on every table." Ethan leaned forward. "Lavender windows?" "Uh-huh," Lila said, eyes shining. "So even sad people can smell something happy when they look outside." Megan blushed. "It's just one of her stories. I told her someday we'll make a place where no one eats alone." Ethan's gaze lingered on her, not with pity, but with quiet admiration. "That's a better business plan than most I've read." Megan laughed softly, brushing hair from her face. "We'll call it the Round Window Cafe. But for now, I'm just trying to keep the lights on." The waitress returned with Ethan's coffee and set down the bill for Megan, a small rectangle of paper that suddenly seemed to dim the table's warmth. Megan opened her purse, the kind of old leather bag that carried more worry than money. Her fingers counted bills twice, lips tightening. Lila watched quietly, chewing slower. Ethan looked away, pretending not to see. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small envelope, and slipped it under the edge of the table without a sound. When the waitress came back, he said casually, "Add this to my check, please." Megan noticed too late. "Oh no, Mr. Walker, you can't." He raised a hand. "It's not charity. It's dinner with old memories. My mother loved this place. She said their noodles could fix anything short of heartbreak." Lila smiled. "Then we'll eat a lot, just in case." The waitress laughed, taking the envelope. "All settled. You folks enjoy." For a moment, the three of them sat in gentle silence. The city's noise softened behind the window, replaced by the clinking of glasses and the low hum of people who believed life, despite everything, was still good. Megan looked at Ethan again. "Why did you really stop that day?" He paused. "Because she reminded me of something I'd lost sight of. Kindness without an agenda." Megan tilted her head. "That's rare in your world, isn't it?" "Rarer than profit margins," he admitted. "But I think I'd trade them all for one honest smile like hers." Lila leaned her chin on her hands. "Mom says smiles are like medicine you can't buy." Ethan chuckled. "Your mom's a smart woman." "She's tired," Lila corrected softly, and Megan flushed. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she murmured. Ethan hesitated, then said, "I saw your husband's name on a staff roster at the Powell plant." Her expression shifted. You own that company?" His throat tightened. "Owned. Past tense. I didn't realize until recently what that closure cost people." She looked down. "It cost a lot, but he doesn't blame anyone. He still believes he'll find something new." Lila piped up again. "Dad says machines can sleep too, but one day they'll wake up and need people again." The words stung more than she knew. Ethan smiled gently. "Your father sounds wise." "He is," she said proudly. "He can fix anything." Ethan sipped his coffee. "Anything," he thought. "Except the damage I caused." Megan reached for her bag. "We should let you eat in peace." He shook his head. "Stay. Please. Let me at least walk you out when you're done." When they stepped outside 20 minutes later, the rain had started again. Slow, silver, forgiving. Streetlights painted halos on the wet pavement. Ethan opened the restaurant door for them, then turned back to the hostess, slipping a folded note with his card inside. It read, "For the little dreamer with the lavender windows. If she ever opens her cafe, I'd like to be her first customer." He left it with the hostess and stepped into the night. At home, he couldn't sleep. The doll sat on his desk beside the photo of his mother. He imagined that small cafe with round windows, the smell of lavender, and people sharing food without shame. "Pay what you can," Megan had said. Not a business model, but a creed. He opened his laptop and typed a note to his assistant. Subject: Community Partnerships. Look into micro-grant programs for local kitchens, especially projects addressing food insecurity. Portland has potential sites near Powell. Let's explore. He saved it, then poured a glass of water and stood by the window. The city shimmered below him. Pearl District towers glowing like paper lanterns, the streets wet with promise and regret. He whispered to the reflection of his mother's photograph, "You were right. Wealth isn't measured in banks." Outside, the clouds shifted, and for the briefest second, a break of moonlight touched the river. A thin, silver bridge between the life he had built and the life still waiting to be rebuilt. And somewhere downtown, in a small apartment above a laundromat, Lila Bennett whispered to her mother, "Mom, Santa came late this year." Megan smiled through the dark. "Maybe he was stuck in traffic." "No," the girl said sleepily. "I think he was learning how to be kind again." The next morning broke with a kind of quiet that didn't belong to cities. Fog lay low over Powell Boulevard, smudging the skyline like thumbprints of ash. Ethan Walker drove slowly, past empty lots and boarded-up laundromats, the kind of neighborhoods developers described as ripe for renewal, language that disguised the grief beneath concrete dust. His car turned down a side street where a rusted sign still clung to a chain-link fence. Powell Industrial Plant, closed until further notice. The words looked temporary once. Now they were fossilized. Beyond the gate, rows of broken windows stared out like tired eyes. Ethan parked and stepped out. His shoes sank into the damp gravel. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train moaned, long, sorrowful, indifferent. He stood for a moment, the smell of old metal and wet asphalt filling the air. This had once been the heart of Portland's manufacturing belt, a place where thousands of workers punched in before dawn and punched out after dark, carrying with them the hum of purpose. And then his company, Walker Urban Group, had purchased the land, promising urban transformation. Transformation. The word felt poisonous now. He approached the padlocked gate. A faded safety poster flapped in the wind. Every hand matters. Its irony struck like a blow. Behind him, footsteps scraped the pavement. "Can I help you, sir?" Ethan turned. A man in a brown work jacket stood near the curb, wiping oil from his hands with a rag. The same rag he'd seen once before. "Jacob," Ethan said quietly. Jacob Bennett squinted. "Do I know you?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "We met at the school. Your daughter was waiting for you." Recognition flickered. "Oh, the guy with the nice coat and the noodles story." His tone carried no malice, just curiosity and exhaustion. "What brings you here? This place doesn't pay anymore." "I know," Ethan said. "I came to see it. I used to own it." Jacob's expression hardened. "Used to?" "Yes. My company redeveloped the site. Or was supposed to." He glanced at the fence. "But it seems we built paperwork instead of progress." Jacob dropped the rag into his pocket. "So you're that Walker?" "I'm afraid so." For a long beat, the only sound was the wind rattling through broken vents. Then Jacob laughed. A quiet, bitter thing. "My guys used to joke that your office chairs cost more than our yearly bonuses." Ethan didn't defend himself. "They probably did." Jacob studied him. "Why are you really here? To feel bad? To film some documentary about regret?" "No," Ethan said softly. "I came to apologize." Jacob blinked, caught off guard by the plainness of it. "Apologize? You think that fixes rent? Medical bills? Pride?" "No. But it's where fixing starts." Jacob's jaw worked, torn between anger and disbelief. "You know what it's like to tell your kid the machines went to sleep? To watch her draw pictures of them waking up again?" Ethan swallowed hard. "She believes they'll wake up." "She believes everything," Jacob said bitterly. "That's what kids do before they learn better." A beat of silence stretched between them. Then Jacob sighed, shoulders sinking. "You don't need my forgiveness, Mr. Walker. You've got your own skyline." "Maybe," Ethan murmured, "but skylines don't keep you warm." Jacob looked away, eyes scanning the skeletal outline of the factory. "They're going to tear it down soon, right? Build your fancy hotel?" "That was the plan." "And now?" Ethan drew a slow breath. "Now I'm reconsidering what building means." Jacob studied him again, this time not with resentment but suspicion of hope. "You're serious?" "I'm learning to be." From the corner of his eye, Ethan saw movement. Two men in neon vests walking toward them. The taller one carried a clipboard. "Morning," the man called. "You folks can't be here. Site's restricted. Demolition team's coming next week." Ethan turned to face him. "Postpone it." "Excuse me?" "I said postpone demolition." The man laughed uncertainly. "And you are?" "Ethan Walker," he said, pulling out his ID. The man's posture snapped straight. "Oh, Mr. Walker, I didn't realize." "You're realizing now," Ethan said calmly. "No one moves a single brick until further notice." The man nodded, retreating quickly. Jacob stared at him. "You just froze a demolition with one sentence." Ethan looked back at the factory. "I spent years tearing things down that didn't need to be. Maybe it's time I built something that does." Jacob crossed his arms. "You can't just fix this with charity." "I don't want charity," Ethan said. "I want repair." Jacob frowned. "Repair takes people. People you already scattered." "Then help me find them," Ethan said. The words hung in the fog. For a moment, Jacob said nothing. Then he gave a humorless laugh. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" "Not anymore," Ethan replied. Jacob studied him another long moment, then shook his head. "You're either insane or serious. Either way, I'll believe it when I see it." "You will," Ethan said. Later that day, Ethan returned to the office tower of Walker Urban Group. The lobby gleamed with marble and glass, employees moving like clockwork under white light. He walked past them unnoticed. Not the ghost they feared, but the ghost he'd become. In his corner office, Lydia Tran was waiting. "Ethan, you're 2 hours late for the design meeting. Investors are—" "Cancel it," he said. "Cancel?" she repeated, blinking. "You can't just—" "I can. We're not building the Riverlight Hotel anymore." Lydia's mouth fell open. "Excuse me?" He opened the folder on his desk and slid it toward her. "We're converting the Powell site into something new. A cooperative space for displaced workers, community-run, training programs, local kitchens." She stared at him as if he'd spoken in another language. "You'll be crucified in the next shareholder call." "Then I'll bring my own cross," he said evenly. "Ethan, you can't risk—" "I already did," he cut in. The risk was thinking profit was the only language worth speaking. She fell silent. For the first time since she'd known him, Ethan's tone wasn't polished or corporate. It was human. He walked to the window. Below, the city buzzed in miniature. Traffic threading through rain, lives intersecting without knowing it. Somewhere out there, a little girl believed even sleeping machines could wake up. "Prepare the documentation," he said. "Call it the Powell Rebirth Project." Lydia hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You're really doing this?" "Yes," he said. "And I'm going to need Jacob Bennett's help." That evening, as twilight bled into the skyline, Ethan drove once more past the riverfront. Lights shimmered across the Willamette, reflections trembling like promises. He thought of Jacob's weary eyes, Megan's quiet pride, Lila's dream of a cafe with round windows. Maybe this was what his mother had meant, that real wealth was something you rebuilt inside others, one act at a time. At a red light, he rolled down the window. The air smelled of rain and metal, a reminder that cities breathe too, sometimes through the people brave enough to mend their broken parts. He whispered to himself, almost a prayer, "Wake up, machines. It's time." The rain returned that evening like an old ache that refused to fade. Portland's skyline blurred into watercolor shadows, and the streetlights along Powell Boulevard shimmered against the wet asphalt. Ethan Walker parked his car 2 blocks away from a small 2-story apartment complex in Lentz District, the kind built decades ago for factory families. Box-shaped, practical, tired. Apartment 2B glowed faintly from within. He could see the silhouette of a woman moving near the stove, and beside her, a smaller figure humming softly. He stood at the foot of the stairs for a long time, rehearsing the words that had haunted him all day. They were simple ones. "I'm sorry, and I'm going to fix it." Yet they carried more weight than most business deals he'd ever signed. When he finally knocked, The sound was almost swallowed by the rain. Megan opened the door in her scrubs, fatigue etched across her face, but softened by surprise. "Mr. Walker?" "Ethan, please." He held his breath. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in. Lila's drawing, but she'll explode when she sees you." The small apartment smelled of noodles, lavender soap, and something faintly metallic, the scent of a home patched together with effort. A single lamp glowed near the couch where Lila sat cross-legged, coloring a picture of a building with round windows and tiny people holding bowls. "Mr. Ethan," she squealed, running over. "Look, it's our cafe. Do you like it?" Ethan knelt beside her. "It's beautiful," he said sincerely. "Can I be your first customer?" "You already are," she said, then whispered, "But we're still saving for the windows." He smiled, his throat tightening. "I might be able to help with that." Megan set down a mug of tea in front of him. "You didn't come all the way here to talk about pretend cafes, did you?" Ethan looked up at her, tired eyes, steady voice. She deserved the truth. "No," he said. "I came because I owe you more than a dinner." Megan frowned. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, his hands clasped together. "The Powell Industrial Plant. The one your husband worked at. It wasn't an accident that it closed. My company, Walker Urban Group, bought that land 2 years ago for redevelopment. I approved it. I'm the reason Jacob lost his job." The room went still. The rain outside pressed harder against the window as if to fill the silence. Megan didn't speak at first. Her lips parted slightly, then tightened. You were the one?" Ethan nodded, voice low. "I didn't know until recently. I was told it was a routine closure, a relocation plan. I never asked who it hurt. That was my failure." From the hallway, a door opened. Jacob appeared, wiping grease from his hands, eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" Megan turned toward him, her voice trembling. "He's the one who shut down Powell." Jacob froze, the rag in his hand stiffening. "You're joking." Ethan stood, meeting his gaze. "No, I'm not. And I came to tell you I'm sorry. Not as a businessman, but as a man who forgot what his work was for." Jacob's laugh came out sharp. "You think saying sorry brings back 20 jobs? Fixes mortgage payments? Gives my kid her father's pride?" "No," Ethan said. "But I'm trying to rebuild what I broke. I halted the demolition. We're redesigning the site into a cooperative, run by the workers, not by me." Jacob stepped closer. "You mean the land you stole from us, you're now giving back like some kind of saint?" Ethan didn't flinch. "No, I'm giving it back because it was never mine to keep." For a moment, the only sound was the rain against the glass and the tick of the old clock on the wall. Lila clutched her drawing, eyes darting between the adults. Megan's voice broke the silence. "Do you even understand what that place meant? That factory was where my husband and I met, where our friends worked. It was our community. You didn't just close a building. You erased a neighborhood." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "Then help me rebuild it." Jacob shook his head. "You can't buy forgiveness." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Ethan said. "I'm asking for a chance to earn it." Jacob's hands balled into fists. "You think you can walk in here, say a few noble words, and we'll just—" "Jacob," Megan interrupted, her voice trembling but calm. "Let him finish." Ethan met her eyes. "I'll transfer ownership of the Powell property to a community trust. You'll manage the cafe, Jacob can oversee the training program. The profits, if there are any, go back to the people who lost everything. I'll stay out of the spotlight. No media, no branding, just repair. Jacob's anger cracked under disbelief. Why? What do you get out of this? Ethan hesitated, then answered truthfully. Peace. I haven't had any for a long time. The words hung there, bare, unpolished, real. Megan looked at him for a long time, her expression softening just enough to reveal the conflict inside her. You can't fix everything, she whispered. I know, he said. But maybe we can start with one block. Jacob turned away, rubbing his face with his hands. You don't get it. I've got nothing left to build with. Ethan glanced at the crayon drawing still lying on the table, the round window cafe surrounded by stick figure smiles. You've got more than you think, he said quietly. Jacob followed his gaze, then exhaled slowly. She believes in that place more than in Santa Claus. Ethan smiled faintly. Then maybe that's where we start. For the first time, Jacob didn't argue. The silence between them shifted from anger to exhaustion, the kind that comes when truth finally drains the poison. From the couch, Lila looked up, clutching her drawing. Can you fix it, Mr. Ethan? Her voice was small but sure, the same tone she'd used on that frozen morning outside the school. Ethan knelt beside her. I don't know yet, he said softly, but I promise I'll try. Good, she said, because if you don't, Santa will be sad. Megan smiled through tears, shaking her head. You've got a way of recruiting people, don't you? I learned from the best, Ethan said, glancing at Lila. Jacob leaned against the wall, arms crossed but no longer tense. If you're serious about this, we'll listen. I am, Ethan said. Tomorrow, I'll meet the board. It won't be easy, but I'm ready to fight for it. Megan poured another cup of tea, set it on the table. Then drink. You'll need it. He took the cup, the steam warming his hands. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said softly. You've got a long road between saying and doing. Ethan nodded. Then I'd better start walking. He finished his tea, stood, and turned toward the door. But before he left, he looked back one last time, at the little apartment, the crayon drawing, the quiet strength of the family he'd almost destroyed. Whatever happens, he said, I'm grateful for tonight. As he stepped outside, the rain had eased into mist. He stood under the flickering streetlight, eyes lifted toward the clouded sky. He whispered, more to himself than to God, let me make this right. Then he walked into the night, a man stripped of titles, carrying nothing but resolve. Behind the window, Lila watched him go and whispered to her mother, He's gonna fix it, I can tell. Megan smiled faintly. Maybe he will. And in that small apartment on Powell Street, hope, fragile, uncertain, but alive, flickered like the lamp that refused to die. The following morning dawned with a pale sun that looked unsure of itself, like it, too, wasn't certain it still belonged in this city. Portland's downtown shimmered beneath a film of fog, and inside the top floor of the Walker Urban Group Tower, the conference room glowed with a colder light, white, sterile, merciless. 12 board members sat around a glass table that could have doubled as a mirror for guilt. Screens displayed figures, projections, and contracts. The numbers moved like tides of profit, oblivious to the human cost beneath. Ethan Walker entered without his usual armor. No tie, no assistant, no small talk. Just a folder, worn from being opened too many times the night before. Good morning, he said, though it didn't sound like one. The CFO, Martin Green, cleared his throat. We received your revised memorandum, Ethan. I assume the Powell Rebirth Project section was a drafting error. It wasn't, Ethan said calmly, taking a seat. A murmur rippled through the room. The chairman of the board, William Crane, leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Let's get this straight. You're proposing to cancel the Riverlight Hotel development, the flagship of our 2025 portfolio? Yes. Crane blinked. Ethan, that project represents a $120 million asset pipeline. Our loan-to-value ratio depends on it. You kill Riverlight, you breach our covenant. I'm aware. Then why? Ethan opened the folder and spread out 2 photos on the table, one of the factory ruins and one of a 5-year-old girl in a red coat, her mittened hands clasped around a paper bag of noodles. The board members shifted uneasily, unused to seeing anything that wasn't a balance sheet. Because, Ethan said, this is what we built over. People, communities, families. That site wasn't abandoned. It was taken. Sentimentality doesn't pay dividends, muttered Carla Downs, head of acquisitions. No, Ethan replied, but decency does eventually. Crane sighed, rubbing his temples. You can't run a corporation on conscience. Ethan's voice stayed steady. Maybe not. But you can't sustain one without it either. He clicked the remote and the wall screen came alive. Slides filled with his overnight proposal. The title read, The Powell Rebirth Cooperative, a worker-owned urban renewal model. He explained swiftly, 40% of the site to be converted into training and manufacturing co-ops for former factory employees. 30% into community micro-businesses, cafes, markets, local crafts, and the rest into affordable housing, with mentorship programs funded by a new Walker Urban Foundation. This isn't charity, Ethan said. It's reinvestment, an ecosystem that keeps the city's heart beating. We can partner with the city council, qualify for environmental tax credits under the Community Benefits Clause, and access green redevelopment grants. We lose margin in the short term, but we gain permanence. Martin leaned back. You're asking us to gamble shareholder capital on moral repair. No, Ethan said. I'm asking you to invest in survival, the company's and mine. The room went silent. Finally, Carla spoke. If you proceed without board approval, it constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty. You could be removed as CEO within 48 hours. Ethan nodded. Then do it. The sentence dropped like a stone in water. Crane's voice hardened. Don't test us, Ethan. I'm not testing you, he said quietly. I'm setting us free. He rose, walked to the window, and looked out at the gray sprawl of the city. Rooftops, bridges, the distant shimmer of the Willamette River. You all remember the company's founding statement. We rebuild what time forgot. Somewhere along the way, we twisted that into, we rebuild for whoever pays more. That's on me. But this is how we return to who we were supposed to be. Martin's phone buzzed. Ethan, the lenders are already calling about the LTV breach. The default clause will activate within the hour. Then let it, Ethan said. You'll lose everything. Your shares, your property. Even your penthouse could be seized as collateral. Ethan turned around. Then at least I'll finally own something money can't take. Carla scoffed. Idealism doesn't rebuild factories. No, he said, but courage does. He reached into his folder, pulled out a notarized document, and slid it across the table. I'm putting my personal assets up as security. My holdings, my residence, my vehicles, everything. Use it to back the project. Crane stared at him. You'd stake your fortune on this? I'd stake my soul if I thought it would help one child stop believing Santa skips her house. The board froze. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Crane finally exhaled. If this fails, you'll be ruined. If it fails, Ethan said, then maybe I wasn't worth saving. By late afternoon, the boardroom had emptied. The decision wasn't final, but the tremor had begun. Ethan stood by the window as the rain thickened again, city lights glinting through the glass. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He answered. Walker. Mr. Walker? It was Megan's voice, soft but urgent. I just saw the news alert. Rumors say your company might default. Tell me it's not true. It's true, he said gently. I'm reassigning the Powell project. The board isn't thrilled. Ethan, she whispered, you don't have to destroy yourself for us. He smiled faintly. I'm not destroying anything, I'm building something different. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then, he said. A pause. Then Megan's voice wavered. Jacob's been telling people, some of the old workers want to meet you tomorrow. They think you might actually be serious. I am, he said. Tell them I'll be there. Ethan, she began, then stopped. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said softly. This storm isn't over. After she hung up, he stood alone in the dim light of the office, rain whispering against the glass. On the desk lay the board packet, heavy with forecasts and legal jargon. Across the cover, he wrote 3 words in pen, heart before numbers. That night, he met Jacob again at a coffee shop near S.E. Belmont Street. The rain had followed him there, drumming softly against the roof. Jacob sat waiting, a notebook open, pages filled with rough sketches of mechanical layouts, parts of machines long gone. You came, Jacob said. I said I would. Jacob nodded. You really pissed off a lot of powerful people today. I know. Some of them are calling you crazy. Ethan smiled. That's a promotion from Heartless. Jacob leaned back. You really think a cooperative can work? The unions won't trust you, and the banks won't touch it. I'm not asking them to, Ethan said. I'm asking you to. Jacob blinked. Me? You understand this place better than anyone. You know the workers, the machines, the rhythm of the floor. Help me rebuild it. Not as my employee, but as a partner. Jacob stared at him. Partner? Yes. For a long moment, the only sound was the hiss of the espresso machine and the hum of rain. Then Jacob slowly extended his hand. All right, but if you're lying, I'm not, Ethan said, taking his hand firmly. Jacob's eyes softened. Then we'd better get to work before you lose the building. Ethan laughed quietly. Deal. They sat there, 2 men who'd once stood on opposite sides of power, now sketching blueprints on napkins under flickering light. The rain outside turned from threat to rhythm, steady, relentless, alive. By the time they left, the coffee shop was closing. Jacob turned to him under the awning. You really meant what you said, heart before numbers? I did. Then maybe, Jacob said, we've both been waiting for this storm. That night, Ethan returned to his penthouse and looked out across the sleeping city. The skyline no longer glowed like a trophy. It looked like something that needed tending, fragile, full of lives flickering in windows. He whispered to the quiet, let it rain. Portland's always grown best in the rain. And somewhere downtown, in a small apartment, Lila Bennett slept with a smile, a crayon drawing of her round window cafe tucked under her pillow, unaware that the man she once called Santa's friend had just risked his empire to keep her dream alive. By the end of the week, Portland was buzzing. Local radio stations replayed the same headline every hour. Walker Urban Group faces financial crisis after CEO cancels $120 million hotel project. Some called it madness. Others called it courage. But most people, especially those who lived near Powell Boulevard, just called it hope. Ethan Walker stood in front of the mirror that morning, fastening the cuffs of his shirt with the slow steadiness of someone walking into battle. The sleepless nights had left faint shadows under his eyes. But there was a new kind of light behind them, the clarity of conviction. On the counter lay a single card drawn in crayon. For Mr. Ethan, from Lila. Don't forget your heart. The L in heart was backwards, but it was the truest handwriting he'd ever seen. He slipped the card into his jacket pocket and left. Portland City Hall was a cathedral of concrete and glass that morning. The marble steps glistened with rain. Inside, the air was thick with the rustle of papers, murmurs of reporters, and the faint hum of live broadcast equipment. The public hearing on the Powell redevelopment project had drawn more attention than any city meeting in recent memory. Local workers packed the back rows, holding cardboard signs, "Rebuild jobs, not hotels." A few banners bore Lila's crayon drawing of round windows, now the symbol of their cause. Ethan entered quietly, escorted by City Commissioner Dana Liu, who had agreed to mediate. He was met with a dozen cameras and flashbulbs that turned the moment into theater. Lydia Tran, his head of PR, stood nearby, whispering urgently, "We can still control this narrative, Ethan. If you make it about economic reform—" "No," he interrupted gently. "It's about people, Lydia. Let it stay that way." She sighed, defeated but strangely proud. At the front of the chamber, the city seal glowed above the dais. Commissioner Liu adjusted her microphone. "This hearing is now in session. The City Council has received a proposal from Walker Urban Group to convert the Riverlight Hotel project into a community-owned cooperative complex. We'll hear from Mr. Walker first, followed by public comments." Ethan stepped up to the microphone. His reflection stared back from the polished wood of the podium. He took a slow breath. "Good morning," he began. 3 years ago, I signed a contract to turn the Powell industrial site into a luxury hotel. On paper, it was a success story, another milestone in Portland's redevelopment. But in reality, it was a graveyard. A graveyard for livelihoods, for dignity, for families. I know, because I met one of them. He paused, scanning the crowd until his eyes found Megan Bennett, sitting quietly with Jacob and Lila between them. The little girl waved, holding a stuffed doll in her lap. "Her name is Lila," Ethan continued. "She asked me once if Santa skips small houses. I didn't have an answer that day. But now I do. Santa doesn't skip small houses. We do. We skip them when we choose profit over people, when we build towers instead of tables." The chamber went still. Reporters stopped typing. Even the air seemed to lean closer. He went on. "I've spent my life turning steel and glass into wealth. Now I'm turning it back into humanity. The Powell Rebirth Cooperative will return ownership to the very people it displaced. Workers, families, educators. This isn't charity. It's restitution." Commissioner Liu folded her hands. "Mr. Walker, you understand that your company's investors may view this as reckless. Why should the city support a plan that jeopardizes a major tax revenue stream?" "Because," Ethan said, "a city isn't measured by its revenue. It's measured by what it refuses to abandon." Applause erupted from the back rows, hesitant at first, then swelling into thunder. But just as it reached its peak, another voice rose over it. "Excuse me, Madam Commissioner," a man said, stepping forward. "As a shareholder of Walker Urban Group, I have a right to speak." It was Gerald Owens, one of the firm's oldest investors, a man with a tie too bright for the gray day. "Mr. Walker has no legal authority to repurpose corporate assets for emotional experiments." His so-called cooperative violates every clause in our charter. I move that the city suspend his development rights until our board elects a replacement." A murmur swept through the hall. Cameras flashed. Ethan didn't flinch. "Mr. Owens is correct about one thing," he said. "I did break the old rules, but those rules were written for buildings, not for hearts. If doing what's right voids my title, then so be it." Owens sneered. "That's not bravery. That's stupidity wrapped in poetry." Before Ethan could respond, another sound rose, small but clear. A child's voice. "Mr. Ethan's not stupid!" Every head turned. Lila stood on her chair, her tiny hands gripping the backrest. "He listens! When people talk, he doesn't look at his phone!" A ripple of laughter broke the tension, but the girl wasn't finished. "He told me surprises don't always need wrapping, and he said machines can wake up again if people help them." Her mother tried to pull her down, mortified, but Commissioner Liu raised a gentle hand. "It's all right. Let her speak." Lila looked around, unafraid of the hundreds of eyes fixed on her. "I just think grown-ups should build places where people can eat noodles and smile again, that's all." For a moment, the chamber was silent. Then applause began, first a few claps, then a wave. Reporters lowered their cameras. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. Even the hardened investors looked uncertain of their outrage. Ethan swallowed hard. "Thank you, Lila," he said quietly. Commissioner Liu smiled faintly. "Well, Mr. Walker, that's a compelling closing argument. The City Council will deliberate on the zoning variance. We'll reconvene next week for a final vote. Until then, the demolition permit for Powell Street is officially suspended." Ethan exhaled, relief spreading through him like warmth. He turned to Megan and Jacob. Megan mouthed a simple thank you. But not everyone was clapping. Gerald Owens stormed out of the room, barking into his phone. "File the motion. I want him out before Monday." After the hearing, the courtyard outside City Hall was bathed in silver rain. Journalists swarmed the steps, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Walker, are you stepping down as CEO? Is the cooperative officially approved? Who's the little girl everyone's talking about?" Ethan smiled faintly. "She's the reason this story matters." He didn't say more. Instead, he guided Megan, Jacob, and Lila through the crowd, shielding them from the flashing lights. "You did it," Megan said softly. "You told the truth." He shook his head. "She did." He looked down at Lila, who was twirling her doll in the rain. "Sometimes the smallest voices make the biggest noise." "Will they let you keep your job?" Jacob asked. "Maybe not," Ethan admitted. "But if I lose it doing the right thing, that's a trade I can live with." A car horn echoed down the street, their cue to leave. As they reached the corner, Megan touched his arm. "You changed more than a city today, Ethan. You changed how people look at you." He smiled, though the smile carried the ache of exhaustion. "Let's hope I can live up to it." As they parted, Lila turned back and shouted through the drizzle, "Don't forget your heart." He patted the card in his jacket pocket. "I won't." Then he stepped into the rain, head held high, unaware that the battle had only just begun. The storm that had hovered over Portland for weeks finally broke into sunlight. The sky above the Willamette River cleared, and the air smelled faintly of wet pine and new beginnings. On Powell Street, cranes stood still, their long arms frozen mid-air like witnesses to change. The old factory's rusted frame had been partially dismantled, leaving behind an open space of earth, beams, and the echo of footsteps that were not there yet, but would be. A white banner stretched across the gate. Powell Rebirth Cooperative, groundbreaking ceremony, April 10th. It wasn't the kind of event Ethan Walker was used to. No champagne, no photographers, no black tie guests, just the hum of conversation, the smell of coffee in paper cups, and the quiet buzz of people who had shown up because they finally believed. Ethan arrived early. He wore jeans, a gray work jacket, and boots still stiff from their first use. His hands itched to help, not to sign, not to direct, but to do. Jacob Bennett was already there, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand. He looked like a man standing on the edge of something both terrifying and beautiful. "Morning, boss," Jacob said, grinning. Ethan shook his head. "Not boss, partner." Jacob chuckled. "Right. Partner?" He gestured toward the skeleton of steel behind them. "We kept part of the old framework. You can still see the line where the machines used to stand. I figured we'd leave it there, kind of like a backbone." Ethan nodded slowly. "Good call. We rebuild, but we remember." A van pulled up near the curb, painted with hand-lettered words. "Mother's Table Cafe, pay what you can." Megan Bennett stepped out, her hair tied up under a blue scarf, wearing an apron dusted with flour. She waved toward them. "Breakfast's ready." Ethan smiled as volunteers lined up for coffee and cinnamon rolls. The cafe had become the heartbeat of the project, serving food to anyone who came, no questions asked. Megan managed it with calm precision, somehow balancing budgets, recipes, and compassion with equal grace. And then came Lila, in her red coat holding a small potted lavender plant. She ran toward Ethan and held it out proudly. "For you! We're planting them everywhere, so the factory smells like dreams." He crouched down, accepting it as if it were gold. "Then this place is already blessed." Lila beamed. "Mom says it's called Community Garden, but I call it Hope Smell." Jacob laughed from behind them. "She's been giving everything new names. Yesterday she renamed the break room Noodletown." "Well," Ethan said, "I'll take Noodletown over a boardroom any day." By noon, the courtyard filled with people, workers, teachers, volunteers, even a few reporters who'd come without their corporate scripts. The sound of chatter mixed with the rhythm of construction tools. A mural was being painted on the side wall, hands of all colors lifting gears, surrounded by lavender blooms. Ethan stood at the microphone set up near the stage, just a plank of wood borrowed from the old factory floor. He didn't have a written speech, only a heart full of unfinished sentences. "Thank you for coming," he began, voice steady but raw. "I once stood in rooms filled with glass and marble, speaking to people who measured value by profit. Today I stand on soil, real soil, among people who measure value by what we build together." Applause rose softly, then grew. He continued, "This land used to belong to Walker Urban Group. I'm happy to say it doesn't anymore. It belongs to you, to every person who lost something here and still showed up to rebuild." He turned toward Jacob and Megan. "This project is led by those who understand what community means. Jacob will oversee the Maker Garage, a workshop where anyone can learn a trade or fix what they once thought was broken. Megan will run the community kitchen where no one goes hungry, ever. And as for the rest," he smiled down at Lila, who stood clutching her doll in the front row. "We've reserved this corner for the children's garden. Lila had the idea. She said it should be filled with lavender so that even the sad days smell better." Lila's cheeks flushed as the crowd laughed softly. "She also said," Ethan added, "that machines can wake up if people help them. I think she was right. Today, we're waking up." The applause thundered. Even the construction workers resting on scaffolds clapped their gloved hands. Ethan stepped back, letting Megan take the microphone. She looked around, at the faces, the banners, the sky clearing like forgiveness. "My husband used to tell me," she said, "that dignity doesn't disappear. It just waits for someone brave enough to bring it back." Thank you, Ethan, for remembering us. And thank you, Portland, for showing that second chances can build stronger cities than money ever will. Jacob came up next, his voice rough with emotion. I thought I'd never set foot in this place again. I thought it'd just be another ghost factory. But seeing everyone here, workers, students, families, I realized something. Ghosts don't leave when you rebuild. They help you find your way. The crowd fell quiet. Then Lila tugged on Ethan's sleeve. Can I say something too? He nodded, lifting her up to the microphone. She leaned in, eyes bright, and said, Santa didn't forget me. He just sent someone later. The words hung in the air like a benediction. The audience erupted into applause that shook the scaffolding, laughter mixed with tears. Even the local news anchor lowered her camera, unable to keep filming through the lump in her throat. When the noise settled, Ethan wiped his eyes and picked up the ceremonial shovel. Together with Jacob, Megan, and Lila, he pressed the first scoop of soil aside. Cameras clicked, but this time, no one cared about the angles. They cared about the meaning. A choir from Grant Park Elementary began to sing softly. A song about home and sunlight and lavender. The workers joined in, voices untrained but full of life. As the sun began to set behind the city, a faint purple light touched the clouds, the same hue as the flowers that now lined the garden beds. Ethan stood beside Megan, watching families linger, children planting seedlings, old workers laughing as they sketched floor plans on napkins. This is what cities should sound like, she said quietly. He nodded. This is what forgiveness sounds like. Jacob approached, wiping sweat from his brow. We did it, he said. We really did it. Not yet, Ethan replied. We just started. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, Ethan lingered at the edge of the site. The air hummed with the scent of lavender and wet soil. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Lila's original crayon drawing, the round window cafe, smiling stick figures, and a small handwritten caption, Home. He pinned it to the construction board and whispered, Now it's real. The wind carried the scent of coffee and earth across the empty lot, where one small light remained burning inside the new cafe. And in that gentle dusk, for the first time in years, Ethan Walker felt completely human. No longer a man of numbers, but a builder of hope. 1 year later, the city no longer whispered about the scandal. It spoke instead of the miracle on Powell Street. What had once been a fenced-off graveyard of rust and weeds was now alive, a living patchwork of workshops, cafes, and laughter. The Powell Rebirth Cooperative had become a model studied by universities and visited by mayors from other states. Yet for those who worked there, it was never a project. It was simply home. At sunrise, light filtered through the circular windows of the round window cafe, washing the walls in soft lavender hues. Inside, children in aprons stirred pancake batter while Megan moved between tables, balancing plates and kindness with the same quiet grace. A handwritten sign hung by the door, Pay what you can. If you can't, pay with a story. The rule had turned strangers into friends, and hunger into conversation. Across the courtyard, Maker Garage buzzed with the sound of tools. Jacob leaned over a workbench, teaching a group of teenagers how to repair an engine. Their hands were greasy, their laughter loud. Above them, a banner fluttered, Machines can wake up again, and so can people. And in the middle of it all, sitting cross-legged on the concrete, Lila Bennett, now 6, tended to her lavender plants in the children's garden. Her red coat had been replaced by a blue denim jumper, her hair tied in 2 small braids. She hummed as she worked, planting tiny purple blooms that swayed in the morning breeze. "Careful with that one," said a familiar voice. Lila looked up. "Mr. Ethan?" Ethan Walker stood there, no longer in suits or headlines. He wore a plaid shirt, rolled sleeves, and a smile that came easier these days. In his hands, he carried a small wooden box. "What's that?" she asked, wiping soil on her knees. "A surprise," he said. "The kind you can't see until it grows." He opened the box to reveal a row of tiny seedlings, each labeled with a name, one for every worker who had come back to help rebuild the site. "Mom says you named the fellowship after me," she said shyly. Ethan nodded. "The Lila Bennett Fellowship. It gives scholarships to kids who want to study engineering, farming, or cooking, whatever helps build communities. You inspired it." Lila tilted her head. "Did I really?" "You did," he said. "You reminded me what giving is supposed to feel like," she grinned. "Like noodles and hugs?" Ethan laughed. "Exactly like that." Megan stepped out from the cafe, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "I thought I'd find you out here," she said. "Jacob's threatening to name the new welding robot after you." Ethan smiled. "Tell him to at least spell it right this time." Megan handed him a cup. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "The old life, the meetings, the skyline, the boardroom applause." He looked out toward the city in the distance, its towers glinting beyond the river. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I come here, and I remember that applause fades. Laughter doesn't." She smiled, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "You sound like a man who's finally at peace." "Maybe I am," he said, gazing at the round windows of the cafe where sunlight now poured in like grace. "I thought redemption was something you earned. Turns out it's something you build, brick by brick, hand by hand." A gentle breeze swept through the courtyard, carrying the scent of lavender. Children chased each other between flower beds, their laughter ringing like wind chimes. Jacob appeared at the doorway of the maker garage, wiping his hands on a rag. "Lunch is on the table, folks. And Lila, the city mayor's coming later to see your garden. Better make those flowers stand tall." Lila saluted. "Yes, Captain." As she dashed off, Megan turned to Ethan. "You know, she still thinks you're Santa's friend." He chuckled. "Then I'd better not disappoint her." They walked together toward the cafe. Inside, sunlight spilled across the wooden floorboards, where customers shared meals and stories. One corner wall was covered with notes, hundreds of them, each written by visitors who'd been helped, fed, or simply listened to. Ethan paused to read one. "To the people of Powell Street, you reminded me what home feels like. Thank you." He smiled, placing a new note beside it. "Thank you for reminding me what purpose feels like. E.W." Megan read it, eyes glistening. "You're leaving your mark again." "Maybe," he said, "but this time, I don't want my name on the plaque." That evening, as the sun melted behind Mount Tabor Park, the cafe lights glowed soft and golden, the courtyard filled with music, a small jazz band from Grant Park Elementary playing under string lights. People danced barefoot on the pavement, the air sweet with lavender and warmth. Lila tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Come dance with us." He shook his head, smiling. "I'm terrible at dancing." She grinned. "Good. Then you'll fit right in." She pulled him toward the circle. Megan and Jacob joined, laughing as the band played an off-key but heartfelt version of "What a Wonderful World." The children twirled, the adults clapped, and for one shining moment, the whole city felt like family. When the music faded, Lila leaned against Ethan's arm, sleepy-eyed. "Mr. Ethan," she whispered, "is this your house now?" He looked around, at the lights, the laughter, the round windows glowing in lavender dusk. He smiled. It's not just mine, Lila. It's ours. She yawned, content. Then Santa's gonna love it. Ethan laughed softly, his eyes misting. I think he already does. Later, long after the last guests had gone, Ethan stood alone outside the cafe. The night was quiet, except for the soft rustle of lavender in the breeze. The round windows reflected the moonlight, circles of gentle silver, framing everything he'd once lost and found again. He looked down at the potted lavender plant Lila had given him a year ago, now grown tall and fragrant. He whispered, "You did it, kid." From somewhere behind him, Megan's voice carried through the open window. "Ethan? You coming in?" "In a minute," he said. He took one last look at the garden, at the machines that hummed again, the cafe that fed without condition, the people who laughed without fear. For the first time in his life, Ethan Walker didn't feel like a man building for tomorrow. He felt like a man finally living today. The wind stirred gently through the lavender field, and in that quiet glow, the city seemed to exhale, healed, alive, and whole. Thank you for watching this story of kindness, courage, and second chances. If it touched your heart, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share it, so more people remember that compassion can rebuild anything. Because sometimes the smallest act of love can change an entire city.